Hello and welcome to another tutorial. I thought before you just see my hands waving about with fabric, I should just show my face and say hello. You can see the ironing board behind me, you can see washing up over here. It is hotter than Hades here today. It's about 28 degrees. Nobody in their right mind should be sewing. But I need to sew a bag as a prize for an along I'm running on my channel, and one as a gift as well. And I thought I would film the process so I can do another tutorial for you. I've got two other tutorials on this channel: how to sew a simple drawstring bag and how to sew a simple zippered bag. I am not a professional sewer in any way. I'm completely self-taught and I make it up as I go along. And the last two tutorials, everyone really loved how simple they were. This is even more simple. So I'm going to move the camera down and show you what we're going to make today. Okay, so we're going to make a really simple bag. I've got my fabric here, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the shape of the bag is this. That is it. You're going to draw this yourself. You can completely make this pattern up yourself. It is really simple. This is one I've used before, and I'm going to put this into a PDF for you in case you can't be bothered making the pattern yourself and you want to keep it even more simple, and you can just print this one out. But I'm going to show you how to do it, just so you know, because it is really easy. So I'll just put this to one side for a minute. I'm going to get a bit of A4 paper. Now it's going to look upside down to you, so I think what I'm going to do is flip the screen, which might make it look a bit weird, but at least it'll be the right way up. Okay, we're going to fold our paper in half, like that. So we've got a join in the middle. Now I found it helpful to open it up. I can see where the middle of the bag's going to be, and just think to myself, how wide do I want the opening at the top? Now I want it quite wide, but I don't want it the full width of the paper, because I don't just want a square bag. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm going to make a little line there, imagining that that plus the same on the other side is going to be the opening of my bag. Then I'm going to fold it back up again. So I've got the fold on this side, got my little mark here, and then completely freehand and probably a bit wonky, I'm going to start here and make a curved line out near to the edge and round, curving into the bottom like that. How wonky is that line? That is the wonkiest line in the world. Then I'm just going to take a pair of scissors. I'm going to cut just inside that line and follow it round. Oh, stay in shot. Then there's a bit of a cornery edge here, so I'm just going to smooth that off. I'm going to open it up, and there we go. That is our bag shape. That is it. That is as simple as it's going to get, and I think what I'm going to do is my original one I think is a bit smaller than that. Yeah, can you see? My one that I've just done is a bit wider, so let's write on it. There we go. So I've written on here, so this is my original one, which I've made bags with before. I've written mini bag pattern on. So on the new one that I've just done, I've written mini bag wide. And this is the one I will put into a PDF for you, because you get like a bit of a bigger bag then, and it will still be on A4, so you can just easily print it off. Now to do the drawstring casing, the measurement that you're going to need for that, and I'll talk about the rest of the materials you're going to need in just a second. Take the measurement of the top of your bag, which I haven't measured here, but I know on my smaller one that I've done originally is 21 centimetres. And that's how wide you want it, and then you want it to be 10 centimetres deep, or yeah, in height, 10 centimetres, and you'll want to cut two of those. But I'm going to take you through all that step by step in a minute. So the other materials you're going to need some fabric. I've got 3 lovely types of fabric here, and you're just going to want to check you've got enough. So this beautiful yellow, these were gifts from a lovely lady called Ruth, who watches this channel. This is folded double. I'm just going to check if I put in my pattern on that I've got plenty of fabric there for this pattern. I do. And then I've got these 2 other fabrics, and if I have time during this tutorial I might use those, who knows. And I've got some old denim here, some old damaged jeans. They're not good enough for the charity shop, my husband's old jeans, so I'm going to see if I can maybe for fun make a little denim bag as well. We're not doing any box bottoms or anything complicated than that, so it should be quite fun. I won't be able to have enough fabric to just get it out of a plain bit of denim, but I should be able to maybe cut across the seam and have a little feature in the middle. So we'll have a little muck around with that and see if we can do it. And then you're going to need some lining fabric. I've just got this grey. I have no idea if I've got enough. I'm hoping so. If not, I might line the denim one with this fabric actually, and I might use this also for the denim drawstring, because denim's a bit too stiff to use for a drawstring casing. So, but we'll work that out together as we go along. And then completely optional interfacing. I usually use a heavyweight Veline, which I'll link underneath, but I've run out of it. So I've got this lovely sort of fluffy fusible interfacing that was a gift. So I don't know what type it is, but I do really like it. I don't think we can get it in the UK. This came from the US. So I'm going to use this instead because that's what I've got. But this is completely optional. You do not need to interface your bags. It just gives a bit of structure to it. In fact, you could use an old tea towel or something to give a bit of thickness to it if you wanted. But yeah, so that's optional. You're going to need some scissors. Dressmaker's scissors are handy, but if you don't have them, any old scissors will do. This is not a professional tutorial after all. You are going to need some thread and a needle if you're hand sewing, because you can absolutely hand sew this, or some thread and a sewing machine if you're using a sewing machine, which I will be for this tutorial. And if you're making your own pattern, you're going to need a pen and a bit of A4 paper. That's it. Oh, and an iron and an ironing board, which is where we're going now to start putting this all together. Before we go over to the ironing board, I forgot to say you're also going to need some drawstring. I get mine on eBay, and I will link the type that I get on eBay underneath. Now, you might not be able to access that wherever you are in the world, but it will at least give you an idea of the type of drawstring stuff that I use. All of the measurements and everything that you need to know regarding seam allowances, measurements and things like that will be in the description box underneath this video. And sorry for all the shadow. I'm filming this really early in the morning. It's only about 8:30 because it's going to be so hot today, and I wanted to get it done before I'm no good to anyone, basically. So I like to get everything cut out in advance, so that by the time I go to the sewing machine, I can just crack on and get sewing with minimal running to and from the ironing board. I've just been having a little play around, and I can't get two outer bags out of this size, so I'm just going to stick to one. I folded it in half so that I only have to cut it once. So what I've done is I've just folded it so like that. It doesn't really matter with this fabric, I don't think, which way. Oh, maybe it does actually. So after a lot of faffing, I've decided to do it this way up. If you hear noises, by the way, my husband's just coming back from the school run and he's getting ready to go out for a run before he starts work for the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to position that there. And then it's a good idea to weight your pattern down. I like to use things like jars of mango chutney to hold it down, but today, because it's so hot, I happen to have, that's not gone into the freezer yet, gel ice pack, which is going to work quite well. That's going to help me position my fabric whilst I cut around it. Ta-da! Okay, now I'm going to cut the interfacing. Like I say, you don't have to have interfacing, but I'm going to. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to use my bit of paper. I'm just going to use the fabric I've cut out, because this is quite grippy, this interfacing. I'm literally just going to place my fabric onto a bit that looks like it's going to fit. I will use my professional sewing weight and then cut around just like that. I've only got bits and pieces of this, so I'm just going to use the bits that I can find that will fit. Now, as this is in fusible interfacing, I've just ironed that straight on. But if you're not using fusible interfacing, you would just keep that together with your outer bit of fabric, and you'll sew it together at the stage when we get to sewing the two outer pieces together. I don't know if any of that just made sense. The point is, if you're not using fusible, just keep it together with the outer piece that it matches, and we'll get round to doing that in a minute. But seeing as mine is fusible, I've done that now so that I don't drop it or lose it or do something that I'm likely to do. Right, I'm going to find a bit that fits the other piece now. So now we're going to do the drawstring casing. So what we need to do is measure the top of your bag, and whatever that measurement is how wide your drawstring is going to be. So I'll put all the measurements underneath, but whatever, if you've made your own pattern, it's whatever this top measurement is, needs to be the same for your drawstring width. I'm just using a biro and a ruler and drawing it straight onto the fabric, because we don't have time to do anything else. And then you want it to be 10 centimeters deep. So I'm going to cut it all in one go and make it 20, and then just cut it in half. I should really be using my sewing ruler, but it's in the cupboard and I forgot I had it, to be honest. So I'm just going to measure 20 down the edges, and the same measurement as the top of my bag across. It doesn't have to be the most accurate thing you've ever cut out, because no one's going to notice by the time it's finished. And if it's hot like it is here today, have I mentioned it's hot? I don't like the heat. Then you just want to get your sewing done quickly, don't you? Get it done. So there we have it. I'm just going to fold that in half and iron it so I get a nice crease. And then I'm going to use that crease as a guide for where to cut. So I have my 2 drawstring casings. There we go. And now what we want to do is, you can just do this by eye, just fold down a really little bit. Like that. Let me measure how much that little bit is that I've just folded in. It's about 1/2 centimetre that I've just folded in and ironed down. Now the ironing is a really helpful thing to do at this stage. Help it stay where you want it when you come to sew this bit together. And then I'm going to fold that again. So just fold it over again and iron it again. So you have a double fold, which means all that raw edge is encased, never to be seen again, and it won't get caught or fray when you're using it as a drawstring. So you want to do that at each end of your drawstring casings on both bits. About 1/2 centimetre. I wouldn't go much more than 1/2 centimetre. I wouldn't go more than 1/2 centimetre at all. In fact, if you can go less than 1/2 centimetre, that's great. But leave yourself room to sew, because we are going to stitch these bits together. And I'm not measuring it, I'm just doing it by eye, because this is a handmade thing. A handmade gift. It's not a professional factory made thing, laser cut on some machine. There. This will be the first thing we sew in a minute. So that's my drawstring casings done. And my outer bag. Now I'm going to cut the lining in exactly the same way. Okay, so I have cut out my 2 outer pieces, my 2 lining pieces, and my 2 drawstring pieces, and those are the components of the bag, including the interfacing as well, if that's what you're using. And while I was at it and I was on a roll, I cut out all the components for another one. So I've got my 2 drawstring cases for this fabric, my 2 outer pieces of this fabric, and I still need to cut the interfacing. But what I might do is just make this one without the interfacing to show you how that looks. Save me a job as well, won't it? And my 2 lining pieces. So for the denim, I'm going to need to do a bit of working out. I have cut a different pattern for the denim. So this is the one I've been using that we cut out. but I was a bit concerned that this opening was going to be too narrow. So I've done a bigger one, which is this one, which has got a 23 centimetre opening. Just because with the denim it's all a bit bulkier, just wanted to make sure there was plenty of room. So I just used exactly the same technique, but you can see it's come out a slightly different shape and size. It's still going to work. So this is the one I'm going to use for the denim. I'll include both in the PDF, shall I? A PDF for each of these sizes that you're seeing me using. And I'm just going to cut a hole. I want to cut as much of the denim that I'm going to be able to possibly use. I probably won't use the pocket bits, so I'm going to cut around them, but I don't want to cut into any precious denim that I could use. This has got holes all over it, this pair of jeans, so it's not charity shop material at all. But at least it's getting a second life, and I will use as much of it as I possibly can rather than putting it all into landfill. Make a right mess of my ironing board. So now I think I'm going to place it up this way. Do excuse the state of my ironing board. This is real life after all, and this is the state of the ironing board. We could probably do with a new cover for it, but we also need a new dishwasher. Terrible at making decisions about these things. So I'm just gonna place my thing. I might do it double so that my seam meets. Sit that in the middle. My Halford's ice pack. Sorry about that crashing there, that was my scissors. And then I'm going to cut this. It's going to be a bit of a chore because I'm cutting through 2 layers of denim. So there we go. I've got my 2 pieces of denim for my outer fabric, and because I folded it up like that and tried to make sure my seams were meeting, the seam is now going to sit kind of on the same place on both sides, which I think will look quite nice. And I'm going to use a contrast drawstring fabric, the same as the lining. So I'm going to cut those out now, and I'm not going to interface this because the denim is quite firm as it is. So again, I've measured along the top. As I said, this is a bit wider, it's 23 centimetres. So I'm going to measure 23 centimetres wide, and I'm just marking that at a couple of points down here so I can keep my ruler straight. And it's going to be 10 centimetres deep for each drawstring casing, so 10 plus 10 is 20. So I'm just going to measure down 20 centimetres. Then I'm going to cut it in half. Okay, it's time to do some sewing. So the first thing we're going to sew is the drawstring casings. So remember, we folded this over double, and now we're going to sew that down. Okay, so we're going to sew this with a seam allowance quite close to this folded edge. And I just usually do it by eye. Now, when you're sewing something, usually you would sew a few stitches forward and a few stitches back to just make sure it doesn't come unravelled. Now for this you don't really need to do that because this is all going to be sewn into the lining, but I still do it because it just makes me feel safer. So you're just going to sew along quite close to that folded edge to make sure you catch everything. Not that I always do, and sometimes I have to unpick it and go back. There we go. Okay, so we're going to sew this with a seam allowance quite close to this folded edge, and I just usually do it by eye. Now when you're sewing something, usually you would sew a few stitches forward and a few stitches back to just make sure it doesn't come unravelled. Now for this you don't really need to do that because this is all going to be sewn into the lining, but I still do it because it just makes me feel safer. So you're just going to sew along quite close to that folded edge to make sure you catch everything. Not that I always do, and sometimes I have to unpick it and go back. There we go. So there you go. You can see I'm quite close to that edge. So I've definitely caught all the edges of the fabric. And I'm going to do that on the other end of this and on the other drawstring. Got my 2 pieces of outer fabric here, and I'm going to put them right sides together. And you can just pin them if you want. I like to use these clips because I'm less likely to stab myself in the finger with them. So I'm only going to put a couple on just to hold it in place. It's such a small little bag and it's so simple that you don't need to go mad with pins. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do the same with my lining pieces. Now my lining pieces happen to be the same both sides, so it doesn't really matter which way I put them together. But if your lining fabric has a very obvious right and wrong side, make sure you're putting them right sides together, so that you're seeing the wrong side when you do it like this. And there we go. And we're going to sew these together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're just going to sew all the way round from this end, all the way around the bottom up to here for the outer lining, for the outer fabric, sorry. And for the lining, we're going to sew all the way round to about here. Then we're going to lift our needle up, put it across to here, leave ourselves a little gap so we can turn it all out when it's finished, and then all the way round to the top. I should just stop and say, if you have not got fusible interfacing, when you put your 2 right sides of outer fabric together, then place the interfacing, as you can see, as it's placed here on top of that. So you've got the right sides together of your outer fabric here, and then on top of each side you've got your interfacing. Okay, we're almost halfway along the bottom here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lift the needle out of the fabric, lift up the foot, and then I'm just going to drag it across a bit like that until I've got a gap of 2 or 3 inches. Pop it back down. Very slowly start sewing in case it just pulls the needle a bit. Oh, it's unhappy. No, it's okay. I thought it was all going to go wrong then. And then start sewing again, so that we've got a gap for our turning out the bag at the end. So we're back at the ironing board and we're going to put the whole lot together ready for sewing. I brought the camera in a bit closer. So here's our drawstrings, and we've sewn the edges. We're now going to fold them in half and try to get these edges to meet up as well as you can, and iron it. Again, just try and match the edges up. They might not, depending on how you cut it, but if you can try to get them to meet up as much as you can, the iron can kind of sort out the rest for you. There's a lot of things that have been covered up with a bit of a good ironing. So there we go, there's one drawstring. Let's do the other one. 2 drawstrings. And now as this bag is curved, I'm going to just snip around the curvy bits. I'm going to use some slightly smaller scissors. You don't need to use smaller scissors, you can use whatever scissors you've been using. I'm just showing off that I've actually got smaller scissors. So you're just going to cut, obviously not past the seam allowance, just in that little frayed area of the seam allowance. Just cut some little notches on the corners, and that just helps it to sit nicely when it's all finished. Okay, and I'm going to do the same on the lining, and you will see, do you know I said that I thought something had gone wrong? Look, it got all bunched up when I did that bit for the gap. Am I going to sort it out? No, I'm just going to leave it. No one's going to know. It's got to have some mistakes. Also, I think the tension on my machine is a bit out. But never mind. It's not going to fall apart. Hopefully. Okay, now we're going to put the whole lot together to do the final bit of sewing. So we're going to turn our right side, our outer fabric out the right side. This is a good opportunity to see if you've missed any seams or done anything wrong. So we're going to position the drawstrings. Just get them as in the middle as you can. Pay attention to what you want on what fabric you would like to see on the outside. I want to see this nice little pink thing, so that is going to have to go downwards towards the bag so that I can't see it when I'm pinning it. That means I will see it when it's all finished. I'm just going to pin that in the middle and one at each end, or clip it, I should say. I'm going to flip it round. Which side do I want to show here? I think I want that. And do the same on this side, just try and get it centre. Like that. Okay. There we go. Now we're going to put it inside our lining. Now the lining is still inside out, so you can still see the raw edges. It's still right sides together. And we're going to pop this inside here. And it's going to look like a total mess. It's going to feel like it won't fit, but just keep doing it, trust me. I have no idea what I'm doing. I want to match these seams. See this seam on the lining with the same seam on the outer fabric. I'm going to match those seams together. I'm going to turn the flappy bit one way on the lining and the flappy bit the other way on the outer bit, and I'm going to clip that there so I know those seams are matching. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. And when I've done that, I'm just going to straighten it out a bit, and I'm going to line the top of the lining with the top of where I've clipped the drawstring casing to the top of the outer fabric, and I'm going to gently move the clips so the clips are now holding, or your pins if you're using pins, are now all the way through all of our layers. Your interfacing, your outer fabric, your drawstrings and your lining. Just to make sure it's all held together and I won't go wrong when I'm sewing it. It doesn't guarantee I won't go wrong, but just going to have a little look round, check nothing's got accidentally folded. Give it a bit of a pull to check it's all sitting okay, and then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and with a 1/4 inch seam allowance I'm going to sew all the way around the top, and that's it. Then we'll turn it out and see how it looks. Okay, this is the exciting bit where we get to turn it out. So we turn it out through that hole we left in the lining, in my case a slightly dodgy one. We're going to sew this up. We'll never see that mistake again. This is where we get to see if we've missed any seams, made any mistakes. Then we're going to take it to the ironing board and iron out all the crinkles and wrinkles and errors. That looks pretty good. Caught all the seams, which is good. Don't always manage to do that. Have I caught all the seams up here on the drawstrings? Yes, it's a good idea to go around and just double check, because at this stage you can still turn it out and fix any mistakes and things you've made. Right, before I sew up the lining, I'm going to give it a bit of a good iron to get it all nice and flat and make it easier for myself when I do sew it up. Just ironing it, and I've realised, look what I've done. I've caught the drawstring casing there, so it's folded back. That is going to bother me, so I'm going to have to go back in. I'm going to go turn it back out, and I'm going to go in and unpick that bit and make it right, because I can't, there's most things I can live with, but I can't live with that. All fixed. I just cut that little bit of the lining and straightened it out and went over it. That's why it's a good idea to iron it. Even if you have checked it over, when you come to iron it, you pick up mistakes that you might not previously have seen. So I'm now just going to press the life out of it, and then I'm going to pull the lining out and iron that nice and flat so I can get a good finish on the inside of the lining. So I'm just going to iron the lining where I'm going to sew it. I'm just going to turn it over just slightly. Not going to be perfect, nothing about this bag is. And just give myself a fighting chance for getting it all sewn in neatly when I come to do it. If I find that if I've ironed the seam together, it makes my life so much easier, even if it's a bit fiddly at this stage and hot. The temperature's rising at this stage. Now I'm going to do this by eye, and I am going to sew a really narrow seam. Now the proper thing to do would probably be to use matching thread so it didn't show up so obviously. But that would mean changing the bobbin and all of that, and I'm not going to be doing that. So I'm going to do this by eye, and I'm just going to do it slowly, and I'm just going to sew as near to that edge as I safely can. So I've sewn this really near that seam. It's not the neatest finish at all by any means, but it's done. There. Now let's do the drawstring. Now again, this is no exact science. Here's my drawstring, and I've got a large-ish safety pin. If you can hear a high-pitched barking in the background, that is a dog about 4 or 5 gardens down. It's the most annoying dog in the world. Let me just shut the door. Okay, I just shut the door, and that set off next door's dog, so that's fun. This is reality sewing. I'm going to put my safety pin on the end of my drawstring, and I'm going to use that to feed it into one of my drawstring casings, like that. Pull it through, then I'm going to flip the bag over and come back through the casing on the other side. You notice I haven't cut it yet, because I'm going to work out that in a second. Okay. I'm going to make sure that my drawstring's just coming through nicely. It's not pulling or anything like that. It's just sitting completely flat with plenty of room. And I'm going to give myself enough sort of an overspill here. So we just want enough overhang that you'll be able to grip it and pull it like that. Okay. And we're going to take the safety pin off, and we're going to do the same coming back the other way. So if you've got your first drawstring sticking out here, you want to come in the opposite side, like that. I like to try and feed it either along the underneath it or on top of it, on both sides, the same on both sides. So now it's coming out there. Flip the bag over and come back through the other side, underneath the original one or over the original one, to match what you've done on the other side, and try to get about the same. Again, you don't want it pulling. I suppose you could take the original one out that you measured and measure it against it and then put it back in, but that's too faffy for me. There we go. So now we're going to make some little drawstring casings, which is fun and makes it look a lot more fancy than it really is. Okay, to do this you just need a scrap of your main fabric or whatever fabric you want, and you want to cut a piece of fabric 8 centimetres by 3.5 centimetres. Again, I'm doing this in probably the least accurate way possible. It doesn't mean you don't have to be completely accurate. No one's going to spot it. There you go, that's pretty good. So that's 8 by 3.5, and you want to cut 2 of these. I'm not even using my dressmaker's scissors, just got my usual kitchen scissors. There we go. Let's take you over to the ironing board and show you what we're going to do. Okay, so here's our little piece of fabric. You're going to do this twice. You're going to fold each end of the fabric down once, just a little bit. That's probably just under 1/2 centimetre, or probably about 1/2 centimetre. Like that. On each end, iron it down, and then turn it over so those folds are facing down and you've got the right side towards you, and you're going to fold it in half, right sides together, match those top edges and give it another really good iron. Back to the sewing machine. So with your folded edge at the top, you're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance down each side. So here it is. We're going to turn it out. It'll be a bit fiddly, so you might want to use the end of a pencil or a pen or a pair of scissors or something, just to gently turn it out and push the corners out like that. There you go. So we've made a little pouch like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to hold our drawstrings together like that, and we're going to very neatly wriggle it in to our little pouch that we've made. Make sure it goes right down to the end, both bits right to the end without bending. And when it's in place, get a pin or a clip, just pin it in place. And then we're just going to sew that across the top. And there we have it. It is finished. It is by no means perfect. In fact, it's probably the opposite of perfect. I've made a right mess of this bit. Look. But don't they look cool, the little tabs on the end? Just try and make sure you do them a bit neater than me. Or if you're making it for yourself, don't worry about it. And it will sit really nicely. It doesn't have a box bottom, but that curve does mean that it will sit really nicely once you've got your project in it, or whatever you are intending to keep in it. I'm really pleased with it. So I'm going to go and put together the other two to show you how they turn out, and then we'll do a little montage at the end of them all together. Happy sewing. Don't forget to hit like down below if you've enjoyed this video and found it useful, and I'll put a link also underneath to the other 2 bag making tutorials I have on this channel, and let me know how you get on. Thanks for watching. Green bag, I'm literally just going to tie a knot in my drawstring rather than doing the little casing. Really simple way to do it. I've threaded it through in exactly the same way, but I'm just going to tie a good knot, trim the ends, and that's how I'm going to do it for this one.